Black boy helps millionaire with changing the tire, but the next day, a black SUV arrives at his door. Nathaniel was driving his large, shiny SUV down a long, quiet road. The sun was high in the sky, and it was so hot that the tall grass on the sides of the road seemed to sway as if dancing in the heat. Nathaniel tapped his fingers on the steering wheel impatiently. He glanced at his watch and muttered, "I've got an important meeting soon. I can't be late for this." The road stretched on endlessly with no other cars or people in sight. Suddenly, the car jolted as it went over a big bump, and then Nathaniel heard it. A loud thump, thump, thump. His heart sank. He knew what that sound meant. A flat tire? Really? Of course, this would happen now, he groaned, pulling over to the side of the road. Dust flew up around the car as it stopped. Nathaniel got out, and the heat hit him like a wall. He loosened his tie and unbuttoned the top of his shirt, but it didn't help much. The summer sun was relentless. Walking to the side of the car, Nathaniel crouched down to inspect the tire. It was completely shredded, with bits of rubber hanging off. "Great, just perfect," he mumbled under his breath. Frustrated, he took out his phone to call for help. But when he looked at the screen, there was no signal. "No signal? You've got to be kidding me," he exclaimed, shoving the phone back into his pocket. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at the ruined tire. He had no idea how to fix it. In his world, someone else always took care of problems like this, his assistant, a chauffeur, or a service crew. He'd never had to change a tire himself. But here, in the middle of nowhere, there was no one to call for help. Nathaniel leaned against the car and sighed, wiping sweat from his forehead. The heat was unbearable, and the road ahead looked like it went on forever. As he stood there, his thoughts drifted back to a memory from when he was much younger. Back then, he had been stranded on a road just like this, needing help. He remembered how people drove past without even stopping to check on him. It had left him feeling bitter, and he had promised himself that he would never have to rely on others again. Shaking off the memory, Nathaniel adjusted his tie and looked around, hoping to spot another car or a house. The road was completely deserted. Just as he was about to give up, he noticed something in the distance, a small figure walking toward him. Squinting, he saw it was a boy, maybe 14 years old, wearing a faded t-shirt and sneakers that looked a little too big for him. The boy walked closer, his steps confident despite the blazing heat. When he was just a few feet away, he stopped and called out, "Hey, mister, got trouble with your car?" Nathaniel looked at him, feeling both relieved and unsure. "Yeah," he said, trying to sound calm. "Flat tire, and I don't know how to fix it." The boy smiled, his face full of curiosity and determination. "I can fix it. My dad taught me how to change tires. Got a spare?" Nathaniel blinked, surprised. "Wait, you know how to fix this?" The boy nodded confidently. "Sure do. It's not that hard. The spare's usually in the back, right? Mind if I take a look?" Nathaniel hesitated. He wasn't used to trusting strangers, let alone kids, but he didn't really have a choice. Sure. Go ahead," he said, stepping aside. The boy walked to the back of the SUV, opened the hatch, and found the tools and spare tire in no time. Without wasting a second, he grabbed the wrench and started loosening the bolts on the flat tire. Nathaniel stood off to the side, unsure of what to do with himself. He watched as the boy worked, his hands moving quickly and confidently. The rhythmic clank, clank, clank of the wrench was the only sound in the still, hot air. "You're really doing this," Nathaniel muttered, mostly to himself. He felt a mix of amazement and discomfort. The boy didn't seem bothered by the heat or the dirt. After a while, the boy looked up, wiping sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand. "You okay, mister? You're looking kind of pale." Nathaniel straightened his tie and cleared his throat. "I'm fine, just not used to this kind of thing." The boy grinned. "It's no problem. You just got to know what to do and not mind getting your hands dirty." Nathaniel stayed quiet, watching as the boy continued working. He couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Here he was, a grown man in a fancy suit, standing helplessly while a kid fixed his car. In no time, the boy had the spare tire on and tightened the bolts securely. He stood up, dusting off his jeans, and gave Nathaniel a thumbs up. All done. Nathaniel stared at the car, then at the boy. You really fixed it, he said, almost in disbelief. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his wallet and took out a few bills. He held them out to the boy. Here, for your trouble. I really appreciate it. The boy shook his head and stepped back, his hands in the air. Nah, I don't need that. Just wanted to help. Nathaniel frowned, confused. No, really. Take it. You earned it. But the boy just smiled and waved. Take care, mister. Good luck with wherever you're going, he called as he walked away, heading back down the road. Nathaniel stood there, the money still in his hand, watching the boy until he disappeared into the distance. Slowly, he put the bills back in his wallet and climbed into the car. As he started driving, his mind was filled with thoughts. Who helps a stranger without expecting anything in return? Nathaniel couldn't stop thinking about the boy's smile and the way he refused the money. It felt strange. He wasn't used to people being kind just for the sake of it. When Nathaniel got home, his wife Evelyn greeted him at the door. Hey, you're late, she said with a smile. Then she noticed the look on his face. Is everything okay? Yeah, Nathaniel said quickly, forcing a smile. Had a flat tire. A kid helped me fix it. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. A kid? Did he ask for money? Nathaniel shook his head. Nope, refused it, just helped and left. Wow, Evelyn said, surprised. That's pretty rare these days. Most people expect something in return. Nathaniel didn't respond. He went to the dining table where his two kids, Ellie and Josh, were chattering about their day, but their voices seemed distant to him. He barely touched his dinner, lost in thought. Evelyn noticed and leaned closer. Okay, what's going on? You've been acting weird since you got home. Nathaniel sighed, setting his fork down. It's that kid. I can't stop thinking about him. He helped me for nothing, and I just don't get it. Josh smirked. Maybe he's just a nice person, Dad. Nathaniel frowned, but didn't say anything. After dinner, he stepped outside to get some air. Standing in the cool evening breeze, he tried to shake off the strange feeling, but he couldn't. The next morning, Nathaniel woke up with a sense of purpose. He had to find the boy again. He didn't know why, but he needed to thank him properly. He told Evelyn where he was going, got in his car, and drove back to the spot where he had gotten the flat tire. When he arrived, the road looked different in the morning light. Less lonely, more inviting. Nathaniel noticed a small, run-down house set back from the road. Could that be where the boy lived? He parked his car and walked up to the house, feeling a little nervous. The front yard was messy, with some old toys scattered around. He knocked on the door firmly. After a moment, it creaked open and a woman appeared. She looked at him curiously. Can I help you? Nathaniel cleared his throat. Yeah. I'm looking for a boy, about 14 years old. He helped me with my car yesterday. The woman's face softened. You mean Max? Nathaniel nodded. Yes, Max, I wanted to thank him properly. The woman smiled and turned her head. Max, someone's here to see you. A moment later, the boy appeared, his eyes lighting up when he saw Nathaniel. Oh, hey, mister, he said, grinning. Nathaniel smiled back. Max, I couldn't stop thinking about what you did for me. I need to do something for you in return. Nathaniel smiled at Max, shaking his head. You don't understand. I can't just let it go like this. You helped me so much yesterday, and I want to help you and your family. There must be something I can do for you, he said. Max looked at his mom, who nodded at him. He turned back to Nathaniel, thinking hard. Well, Max said slowly, there might be one thing. Nathaniel felt a tiny bit of hope. Anything, he said quickly. Just tell me what you need. Max grinned. How about you come in for breakfast? We don't have much, but it would be nice to eat together. Nathaniel was surprised and didn't know what to say at first. Finally, he nodded. All right, I'd like that. Max opened the door wider, and Nathaniel stepped inside. The house was small but clean and cozy. The kitchen smelled like coffee and eggs. Max's mom was busy cooking. Nathaniel sat at the wooden table looking around. Everything felt so different from what he was used to. Max sat across from him, smiling. "So why did you come back?" Max asked. Nathaniel scratched his chin, trying to find the right words. "I couldn't stop thinking about yesterday," he said. He looked at the simple curtains and the worn floor. "You helped me, and I felt like I should do something to repay you. I just couldn't leave it like that." Max shrugged and sipped his juice. "It's no big deal," he said. "We should help each other when we can, right?" Nathaniel blinked. Max's words were so simple, yet they made him think deeply. His whole life had been about working hard, making money, and expecting something in return for everything he did. But Max made kindness seem so easy, so normal. Max's mom placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of Nathaniel. "It's not much, but we're happy to share," she said with a warm smile. Nathaniel looked at the food and then back at her. He nodded. "Thank you. It's more than enough." They ate quietly for a while. Nathaniel watched Max as he talked with his mom. The way they laughed and smiled at each other made Nathaniel feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. His own house felt so cold and serious compared to this warm little home. Max suddenly looked up at Nathaniel. "So, what's it like, being rich and successful?" he asked. Nathaniel thought for a moment. "It's busy," he said. "There's a lot of work and a lot of responsibility. People think it's all about fancy cars and big houses, but honestly, it can be pretty lonely." Max nodded. "I get that. People see your car and think you have everything, but maybe you don't?" Nathaniel smiled, but there was a little sadness in it. "Yeah, something like that. Sometimes I think I've forgotten what really matters in life." Max tilted his head, thinking. "Maybe you just need a reminder," he said, smiling. "Helping someone feels good, doesn't it?" Nathaniel paused, surprised. Slowly, he nodded. "Yeah, it really does." Max's mom spoke up. "We don't have a lot, but we try to help when we can. That's how my mom raised me, and that's how I'm raising Max." Nathaniel nodded, looking at her and then at Max. "You've done a great job. Max is a good kid." The room grew quiet, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, feeling peaceful for the first time in a long while. It wasn't about money or big gestures. It was about being there, sharing a meal and connecting with people. After breakfast, Max cleared the table, stacking the plates. "So, what now? Are you going to be okay, mister?" he asked with a playful smile. Nathaniel laughed. "I think so, but—" He hesitated, then looked Max in the eye. "I still want to do something for you and your family. Not because I have to, but because I want to." Max glanced at his mom again. She gave him a small nod. Max shrugged. "We could use a few things around the house, but that's not why I helped you." Nathaniel smiled. "I know, and I want to help anyway." He stood up and shook Max's mom's hand. "Thank you for breakfast. It meant more to me than you'll ever know." She smiled. "You're welcome here anytime. Just remember, we don't need big gifts. We're happy to share what we have." Nathaniel nodded and turned to Max. "I'll be in touch. Maybe we can figure something out, something meaningful." Max grinned and gave him a thumbs up. "Sure thing, mister. Come by anytime." Nathaniel walked out of the house, feeling the warm sun on his face. The road ahead didn't look as empty as it had the day before. He climbed into his car, looking back at the house one last time before driving away. As he drove home, his mind wasn't full of work or stress. He thought about Max and what he had said about kindness. For the first time in a while, Nathaniel felt a spark of hope. When he got home, his wife, Evelyn, was standing by the door. "Did you find him?" she asked, her arms crossed. Nathaniel nodded. "Yeah, I did, and I had breakfast with them." Evelyn looked surprised. "Breakfast, huh? That sounds like a good start." Nathaniel smiled. "Yeah, it was. And you know what? I want to do more, not just for them, but for others too." Evelyn stepped closer, resting her hand on his arm. "Maybe you're finally realizing what's important." Nathaniel looked at her and nodded. Maybe I am. The next morning, Nathaniel woke up feeling determined. He wanted to help Max and his family, but it was more than that. He wanted to feel connected again, to make a difference. He tried calling people he knew in the area to learn more about Max, but no one seemed to know the boy. Frustrated, Nathaniel decided he had to go back to the house himself. When he found the house again, he knocked on the door. Max's mom answered, surprised but smiling. "Mr. Nathaniel, you're back?" Max came to the door, his eyes lighting up. "Hey, mister, back for another flat tire?" Nathaniel laughed. "No, not this time." He grew serious. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about helping just because. I want to help you and your family, Max. Not because I have to, but because I want to." Max looked at his mom, who gave him a small nod. Then he turned to Nathaniel and said, "We don't need much, mister. We're okay." Nathaniel smiled. "I know, but I still want to help. Let's figure something out together." Max thought for a moment, then glanced back at his mom. She stepped forward, her face showing a mix of curiosity and caution. "What exactly are you thinking, Mr. Nathaniel?" she asked. Nathaniel took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I was thinking maybe I could help fix up your house a bit. Nothing fancy, but I could make it more comfortable for you all. Max helped me without asking for anything, and this is my way of giving back." Max's mom looked at him, then back at Nathaniel. "We're not the kind of people who like to ask for help," she said, her voice steady. "But I can see this means a lot to you, and it means a lot to us too, knowing someone wants to help just because." Max smiled and nodded. "All right, mister. If you really want to help, I guess we could use it. The roof leaks and the kitchen could use some work." Nathaniel smiled, feeling lighter inside. "Thank you. I promise I'll make this place more comfortable for all of you." Max's mom gave a small smile. "You're welcome to come by anytime, Mr. Nathaniel. Just know we're happy as we are." Nathaniel nodded, his eyes sincere. "I understand, and I'm not doing this because I have to. I want to." He turned to Max. "You showed me something important, and I want to do this." Max looked at him and smiled. "Well then, mister, let's get started." Nathaniel got into his SUV, feeling a sense of purpose as he drove off. On the way, he made a few calls to construction workers and people who could help with the repairs. He explained the situation and made arrangements. For the first time, he felt like he was using his resources for something that truly mattered. That evening, when Nathaniel got home, Evelyn, his wife, was in the living room reading a book. She looked up and saw his face. "You found them again?" she asked gently. Nathaniel nodded, his smile small but real. "I did, and I'm going to help them. Really help them." Evelyn set her book aside, stood up, and walked over to him. She placed her hand on his arm, her eyes soft. "You're doing a good thing, Nathaniel. It's not about the money, you know." Nathaniel looked into her eyes and nodded. "I know. It's about something else, something I didn't realize I needed until now." She smiled, squeezing his arm gently. "I'm proud of you." Nathaniel felt something warm and new inside. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was doing something that mattered. Not just fixing a tire or a house, but connecting with people. He looked at Evelyn, knowing this was just the beginning. The next morning, Nathaniel parked his SUV in front of Max's house. The gravel crunched under his tires as he stopped. The sun was warm, casting a soft glow over the yard. Today was the first day of work. He brought a small team of workers to check out the house and see what needed fixing. Nathaniel took a deep breath and stepped out of his vehicle. Before he could knock, the door opened, and Max was standing there with a big grin. "Hey, mister," Max greeted cheerfully. "Ready to get your hands dirty?" Nathaniel chuckled softly. "I'll let the professionals handle the heavy lifting, but I'll help however I can." He looked past Max and saw his mom in the background with a small smile. "Come in," Max said, opening the door wider. "Mom made coffee. You're going to need it if you're hanging around here today." Nathaniel nodded and stepped inside. The kitchen smelled like fresh coffee, making him feel warm inside. Max's mom smiled politely as she handed him a steaming cup. "Nice to see you again, Mr. Nathaniel," she said. "You didn't have to come today, you know." Nathaniel accepted the mug and smiled back. "I wanted to. It's important for me to be here, not just give orders and leave." She nodded, her eyes kind. "Well, we're grateful, and you're always welcome here." She glanced outside where the workers were unloading tools. "Looks like they're ready to get started." Nathaniel turned to see his crew organizing their tools. He nodded and turned back to Max. "How about you show me around so I know what needs the most work?" Max shrugged with a grin. "Sure thing, mister, but don't expect a mansion." Nathaniel laughed. "I'm here to make it the best version of itself. Lead the way." Max showed him the house, pointing out the leaky roof, the broken kitchen plumbing, and the worn-out floor. Nathaniel took mental notes as he looked around. The house wasn't big, but it felt full of love. It wasn't just walls and a roof. It was a real home. After the tour, they went back to the yard, where the workers had set up a temporary workstation. One of the workers, a big man named Peter, waved at Nathaniel. "Boss, we're ready to start. The roof looks like the biggest problem." Nathaniel nodded. "Let's get to it. Let me know if you need anything." Peter gave him a thumbs up and went to grab supplies. Max stood nearby, watching with an amused smile. "Not used to getting your hands dirty, huh?" he teased. Nathaniel chuckled. "Not really, but it feels good. Different, but good." Max's smile softened. "You know, this means a lot to us, you doing all this." Nathaniel looked at him, feeling his chest tighten. "I should be thanking you, Max. You've helped me more than you know." Max tilted his head, curious. "How?" Nathaniel paused, searching for the right words. "I've spent a lot of my life focusing on work and money, things that don't really matter. Meeting you reminded me of what's important: family, helping others, being part of something bigger." Max smiled shyly and looked away for a moment. "You're not so bad, mister. Most people would just drive by and not stop to help." Nathaniel felt a pang of regret, knowing he might have been one of those people not long ago. "I'm trying to be better," he said softly. Max's mom stepped out onto the porch, her hands on her hips as she watched the workers. "I've never seen this place so busy," she said with a laugh. "It's a good kind of busy, though." Nathaniel smiled. "We'll get everything taken care of, I promise." She nodded, her smile warm. "Thank you, Mr. Nathaniel. You have no idea how much this means to us." Nathaniel looked at Max, who was watching his mom with a gentle smile. Then he turned back to her. "It means a lot to me, too. This isn't just about fixing a house. It's about doing something that really matters." She nodded again, her eyes filled with understanding. "We don't need anything fancy, just enough to make it livable. We've managed fine, but it's nice to have some help." Nathaniel looked up at the roof where Peter was busy hammering away. "I'm not here to change your lives," he said, smiling. "I just want to make things a little easier." Max, a young boy, stepped forward and gently touched his mom's arm. "We're lucky, aren't we, Mom? Not everyone gets this kind of help." Evelyn, his mom, nodded as she looked at him with love. "We are, Max, and we don't take it for granted." Nathaniel smiled warmly. He felt a happiness inside that had nothing to do with the sunny day. It was strange how much he cared for this family already. Nathaniel had spent many years building walls around himself, hiding behind his success and money. But here, in the yard of this old worn-out house, he felt something real, something he hadn't felt in a long time. As the day went on, the crew worked hard. Max helped too, carrying tools and handing out supplies. Nathaniel, who hadn't planned to do much work, found himself pitching in more than he expected. He held ladders, passed nails, and even hammered a few boards into place while Peter kept a watchful eye on him. Sweat dripped down Nathaniel's back, and his muscles ached. But he liked it. It felt good, like he was doing something that truly mattered. He hadn't felt this kind of satisfaction in years. When the sun began to set, the crew finished for the day. The roof was patched, and the kitchen plumbing was fixed. There was still a lot to do, but it was a good start. Nathaniel stepped back and watched Max run inside to test the kitchen sink. Max's laughter filled the house when the water flowed perfectly. Evelyn came to stand beside Nathaniel. Her eyes sparkled with emotion. "You've already made such a difference, Mr. Nathaniel. I don't know how we can ever thank you." Nathaniel shook his head and smiled. "You don't need to thank me. I'm the one who owes you." He glanced at Max, who had run back outside, grinning from ear to ear. "And honestly, I think I'm getting more out of this than you realize." Max ran up to Nathaniel and stopped in front of him. "You're coming back tomorrow, right? There's still a lot to do." Nathaniel put a hand on Max's shoulder. "Of course, I'm in this till the end." Max beamed with happiness, and Evelyn nodded in appreciation. For a moment they stood together, watching the crew pack up. Nathaniel felt something special in the air, a sense of belonging. He knew there was a lot of work ahead, not just on the house, but on himself too. But for now, he was happy to take it one step at a time. The next morning, Nathaniel arrived early. He parked his shiny SUV in front of Max's house. The fresh morning air smelled like freshly cut grass from a nearby field. Nathaniel looked at the old house. The roof was no longer leaking, and the repairs they'd done so far gave the house a new sense of hope. Today, they planned to work on more plumbing and fix the broken floorboards in the living room. As Nathaniel got out of his car, he saw Max sitting on the porch. When Max saw him, his face lit up with excitement. "Hey, mister, you're back," Max called, jumping up and running to meet him. Nathaniel smiled and ruffled Max's hair. "Of course I'm back. I told you I'm here until it's all done." Max nodded, but his face turned a little serious. He lowered his voice and said, "You know, Mom keeps saying we don't need all this, but I think she's really happy you're helping. She doesn't want to say it, but I can tell." Nathaniel looked toward the house. Evelyn was standing at the door, watching them with a soft smile. He nodded at Max and said gently, "Sometimes it's hard to accept help, even when we really need it. I know how that feels." Max looked up, curious. "You do?" Nathaniel paused for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I used to think I could do everything on my own, but I'm learning, thanks to you." Max grinned as they walked to the porch together. Evelyn greeted them with a warm smile. "Come on in, Mr. Nathaniel. I made breakfast again. You've got to keep your strength up to keep up with these boys." Inside, the smell of scrambled eggs and toast filled the air. Nathaniel sat down with Evelyn and Max at the small kitchen table. It wasn't fancy, but it had become one of his favorite parts of the day. They ate together, laughing and sharing stories. Evelyn served the plates and looked at Nathaniel with kind eyes. "I have to say, we've never had anyone do something like this for us. It's a bit overwhelming." Nathaniel shook his head. "It's nothing, really. You've helped me in ways you don't even understand. I just want to give back." Evelyn's eyes glistened with emotion. She looked down at her plate, then back at Nathaniel. "We don't need much, Mr. Nathaniel. Just fixing the roof and the floors is already more than we ever expected." Nathaniel smiled. "I know, but I've been thinking maybe I could do a little more. Fix up the kitchen properly, make sure all the plumbing works, and give Max his own room." Max's eyes widened in excitement. "Really? You'd do that for us?" Nathaniel nodded. "Yes, I want to. This isn't about paying you back. It's about doing something good." Evelyn blinked in surprise. "Mr. Nathaniel, that's more than we could ever ask for." Max practically bounced in his seat. "A room of my own that doesn't leak when it rains? That would be amazing." Nathaniel chuckled. "That's the plan, Max. A warm, dry room just for you." The rest of breakfast was filled with laughter and excitement. Max talked about all the things he'd want in his room, like a desk for his schoolwork and maybe even a new bed. Evelyn listened quietly, her smile never fading. After breakfast, Nathaniel went outside to meet Peter and the crew. He pulled Peter aside and told him about his new plans for the house, the renovations he wanted to begin. Peter nodded, looking serious. "It's a big job, boss, but we can do it. It might take a few weeks. Nathaniel smiled. That's fine. I want it done the right way. Peter nodded again and gave him a thumbs up before heading back to his team to start the day's work. Nathaniel stood for a moment, looking at the house. He saw Max and Evelyn step out onto the porch. Evelyn waved, her eyes meeting Nathaniel's. Something about her gaze made Nathaniel's chest feel tight. He felt thankful, but it was more than that. It was a warm connection he hadn't felt in years, not even in his own home. Nathaniel turned back to the workers and took a deep breath. Today they would work on the plumbing and start fixing the floors. But this wasn't just about fixing a house. It was about building something special, something important. As the day went on, Nathaniel joined in. He carried tools, held boards, and even climbed a ladder to help with the roof. Max was always nearby, ready to help, his excitement contagious. Evelyn stayed on the porch, watching them work. In the late afternoon, when the workers were packing up for the day, Evelyn came up to Nathaniel. Her face looked serious but kind. "Mr. Nathaniel," she began softly, "I've been thinking about your offer." Nathaniel put down the tools he was carrying and gave her his full attention. Evelyn took a deep breath and nodded. "We'd be happy to accept your help. It's hard for us to take charity, but I can see this isn't charity to you. It's something more." Nathaniel felt warmth in his heart and smiled. "It is. Thank you, Evelyn. I promise I'll make this house everything you and Max deserve." Evelyn smiled back, and a tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, laughing a little. "Max is already planning his new room. You've made him so happy, Mr. Nathaniel." Nathaniel looked over at Max, who was talking excitedly to one of the workers. "He's made me happy too," Nathaniel said sincerely. Evelyn nodded, her eyes meeting his. "You're a good man, Mr. Nathaniel. Maybe you didn't know it before, but you're proving it now." Nathaniel felt a lump in his throat and nodded. "I'm trying," he said quietly. "I'm really trying." They stood together for a moment as the sun started to set, painting the yard in warm golden light. Nathaniel looked at the house, then back at Evelyn. This wasn't just the start of something new for her and Max. It was the start of something new for him too. The next day, the house was buzzing with activity. The sound of power tools and clattering equipment filled the yard. Workers were tearing down old walls, fixing floors, and measuring new materials. Nathaniel felt proud as he walked to the porch where Evelyn stood watching the workers. "It's really happening, isn't it?" Evelyn said softly. Nathaniel nodded. "It really is, and this is just the beginning." He looked at Max, who was helping carry wooden planks. Max's joy made Nathaniel smile. The energy around the house felt alive and hopeful. Evelyn looked at Nathaniel thoughtfully. "You've done more than just help with the house, Mr. Nathaniel. You've given Max something to look forward to." Nathaniel smiled gently. "He's a great kid, Evelyn. You've done an amazing job raising him." Evelyn blushed a little and looked down. "We've managed. It hasn't always been easy, but we do our best." Nathaniel nodded, meeting her gaze. "It shows. He's got a good heart, and that's because of you." Evelyn smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you, Mr. Nathaniel. That means a lot." Nathaniel spent the day working alongside the crew. He wasn't used to manual labor, but Peter was patient, showing him how to do things. It felt good to work with his hands, to sweat in the sun. It felt real. Max was everywhere, carrying boards, handing out tools, and sweeping sawdust. His excitement never faded, and Nathaniel admired his energy. At one point, Max ran up to Nathaniel, his face red from the sun and a big grin on his face. "Hey, Mr. Nathaniel, come check this out," he said, tugging on Nathaniel's sleeve. Nathaniel followed Max to the back of the house, where workers were putting in new windows. The old ones were broken and let cold air in during the winter. The new windows were strong and would keep the house warm. "Pretty cool, right?" Max said, his eyes sparkling. "No more cold air at night," Nathaniel smiled. "Yeah, Max, it's great. It's going to make a big difference." Max nodded and looked up at Nathaniel, his voice turning serious. I never thought we'd have anything like this. Mom always did her best, but this is more than we ever hoped for. Nathaniel knelt down and put a hand on Max's shoulder. You deserve it, Max. You and your mom do. I'm just glad I could help. Max smiled brightly. You're a good guy, Mr. Nathaniel. I don't care what you say, you're one of the good ones. Nathaniel swallowed hard, feeling emotional. He nodded. He nodded and gave Max's shoulder a gentle squeeze. Thanks, kid. That means a lot. Later, everyone took a lunch break. Evelyn brought out sandwiches and lemonade, and the workers sat around the porch to eat. They laughed and joked, and Max talked excitedly with Peter about the work. Evelyn sat next to Nathaniel, looking peaceful. Nathaniel looked around, taking it all in. It felt like family, a real family. It wasn't about money or success. It was about people and being part of something bigger. After lunch, Nathaniel and Evelyn stood on the porch again, watching Max run around, his laughter filling the air. Mr. Nathaniel, Evelyn said softly, if you don't mind me asking, why are you doing all this? Nathaniel thought about her question, looking at Max and then back at Evelyn. I think it's because I realized I was missing something, he said slowly. I spent so much time chasing success, thinking that's what mattered. But meeting Max, seeing the way he helped me without asking for anything in return, made me realize there's more to life than money and power. Evelyn nodded, her eyes kind. Sometimes it takes something simple to show us what really matters. Nathaniel smiled. Yeah, and I think I needed that reminder. They stood quietly for a moment, the sounds of laughter and work filling the air around them. Nathaniel took a deep breath and smiled. He felt calm and happy in a way he hadn't felt for a long time. He knew he was doing the right thing, and he knew this was just the start of something special. The sun was setting, painting the sky with orange and pink as the workers packed up their tools. Peter, one of the workers, gave Nathaniel a thumbs up before leaving. Evelyn, who lived in the house, called her son Max inside to clean up. Nathaniel stood in the yard, looking at the house they had been fixing. It wasn't finished yet, but it was looking so much better. Nathaniel felt like the house wasn't the only thing changing. He was changing too. He was learning what was really important. As Nathaniel turned to leave, Max ran back outside, his hair still wet from washing up. He was smiling wide. Hey, mister, Max called out. You're coming back tomorrow, right? Nathaniel smiled and nodded. Of course, Max, we still have a lot to do. Max grinned and gave Nathaniel a big thumbs up. Awesome, I can't wait. Nathaniel watched as Max ran back to the house, waving before going inside. Nathaniel stayed a little longer, looking at everything they had worked on so far. It wasn't just about fixing the house. It was about starting something new for all of them. When Nathaniel got into his car and drove away, he felt good, better than he had in a long time. He knew this was only the beginning of something amazing. The next morning, Nathaniel woke up early before the sun was even up. He sat at his kitchen table, sipping coffee. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt peaceful, like he was getting ready for a big adventure. Nathaniel arrived at Evelyn and Max's house earlier than usual. The workers were already there, getting supplies ready. Nathaniel stepped out of his car and stretched. He looked at the house. The changes were amazing. The new windows, the painted walls, the fixed roof. The house looked full of life again. Max ran out of the house, his face lighting up when he saw Nathaniel. Hey, mister, you're early today, Max said, bouncing with excitement. Nathaniel smiled. I wanted to make sure we finish everything on time. Today's a big day. Max tilted his head, curious. What do you mean? Nathaniel chuckled. You'll see. Evelyn came outside too, tying her hair back and smiling at Nathaniel. Good morning, Mr. Nathaniel. Would you like some coffee? It's fresh. Nathaniel nodded. I'd love a cup. Thanks, Evelyn. Inside, they sat around the kitchen table with their steaming mugs of coffee. Evelyn looked around the kitchen, smiling. The new cabinets made the space look brighter and newer. I can't believe how much has changed, Evelyn said softly. It feels like a dream. Nathaniel smiled back. It's not just a house, it's your home, and it's been amazing to help make it better. Max beamed and looked at his mom. Yeah, Mom's pretty awesome, isn't she? Evelyn laughed, shaking her head. Oh, stop it, Max. Nathaniel grinned. He's right. You are pretty amazing, Evelyn. Evelyn blushed and looked away. Thank you, Mr. Nathaniel, but we all did this together. After breakfast, Nathaniel went back outside to join the workers. They had a lot to finish, painting the outside of the house, fixing the floor in Max's room, and putting up shelves Evelyn had asked for. Max ran around, helping wherever he could, full of energy. Nathaniel worked hard too, but he kept thinking about the surprise he had planned for later. He wanted to do something special for Evelyn and Max, something to show them how much they meant to him. By sunset, the house was done. It looked beautiful. The fresh paint, the strong roof, and the cozy porch made it look like a brand new home. The workers packed up and waved goodbye, leaving Nathaniel with Evelyn and Max. Max couldn't stop smiling. It looks amazing, mister. I can't believe it's ours. Nathaniel turned to Max and smiled. I have one more surprise for you and your mom. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, curious. What do you mean, Mr. Nathaniel? Nathaniel reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to Evelyn. What's this? She asked, her hands shaking a little as she opened it. Inside were papers. Evelyn's eyes grew wide as she read them. She looked up at Nathaniel in shock. Mr. Nathaniel, what is this? Nathaniel smiled gently. It's a trust fund for Max. It's money to help him go to college one day or follow whatever dreams he has. Max's eyes grew big. For me? So I can go to college? Nathaniel nodded. Exactly, Max. You're a smart kid and you can do anything you want. I just wanted to help make sure you have that chance. Evelyn wiped tears from her eyes. Mr. Nathaniel, this is too much. We can't accept this. Nathaniel shook his head. It's not too much, Evelyn. You and Max have given me more than I can ever repay. This is just my way of saying thank you. Max suddenly ran up and hugged Nathaniel tightly. Thank you, mister. Thank you so much. Nathaniel hugged him back, his chest feeling full of warmth. You're welcome, kid. You deserve it. Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes shiny with tears. Thank you, Mr. Nathaniel. You've changed our lives. Nathaniel looked at her, his voice steady. And you've changed mine too, Evelyn, more than you know. They stood there for a while, watching the house in the golden light of the sunset. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a home filled with love and hope. The next morning, Nathaniel arrived at the house early again. The sun was rising, and the sky was full of soft colors. He stood in front of the house, amazed at how beautiful it looked now. Max came running out the front door, his face glowing with excitement. Mr. Nathaniel, it's done! Come see! Nathaniel laughed and followed Max inside. The inside of the house was warm and welcoming. The new wooden floors looked shiny and clean. The living room walls were painted a soft, creamy color, and Evelyn's favorite decorations were neatly placed on the shelves. Max led Nathaniel to his room. His excitement was bubbling over. Look, Max said, pointing to a new desk by the window. Now I have a place to do my homework, and my bed doesn't leak anymore. Nathaniel smiled, looking around the room. It was perfect, just like the rest of the house. For the first time in a long time, Nathaniel felt completely at peace. The house wasn't just fixed, it was alive, filled with happiness and hope. Nathaniel smiled, feeling his chest tighten with happiness as he heard the joy in Max's voice. You deserve it, Max, Nathaniel said softly. You deserve every bit of it. Evelyn walked in from the kitchen, her eyes shining as she looked around the room. It's really done, isn't it? She asked, almost like she couldn't believe it was true. Nathaniel nodded, his voice gentle. It's done, Evelyn, and it's all yours now. Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes filling with tears. Mr. Nathaniel, I can't even begin to thank you. You've given us more than a house. You've given us hope and a future. Nathaniel felt a lump in his throat as he reached out to take her hand. No thanks needed, Evelyn. You and Max gave me something I had lost, a sense of purpose. You gave me a family. Evelyn wiped her tears and smiled. You're part of our family now, Mr. Nathaniel, and you always will be. Nathaniel nodded, his heart full of emotion. I'd like that very much. They walked out to the porch together, where Max was already standing. He was looking out at the road, but his face was serious now. He turned to them and said, Mom, Mr. Nathaniel, I've been thinking about something. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow and looked at Evelyn. What is it, Max? He asked. Max took a deep breath and spoke confidently. I've been thinking about what I want to do when I grow up. I want to help people, just like you helped us. I want to make things better for people who need it. Nathaniel's heart swelled with pride. He stepped forward and placed a hand on Max's shoulder. You're going to do great things, Max. I have no doubt about it. And you know what? You've already started helping people since the day I met you. Max smiled, his eyes shiny with emotion. I guess so, but I want to do more. I want to make a real difference. Evelyn wrapped an arm around Max's shoulders and said, You will, honey. You can do anything you set your mind to. Nathaniel nodded, looking at Evelyn. And you'll have all the support you need, from me, from your mom, and from everyone who sees how special you are. So Max looked up at Nathaniel, his voice small but full of feeling. Thank you, mister. You've changed everything for us. Nathaniel shook his head and smiled. No, Max. You changed everything for me. You reminded me what really matters. The three of them stood there in the morning light, a quiet feeling of happiness around them. It wasn't just about the house being fixed up. It was about the love and the bond they had built. Nathaniel came here to repay a favor, but he found something much bigger, a purpose, a connection, and a family. And he knew this was just the beginning. As the day went on, neighbors began to visit. They brought food, congratulated Evelyn and Max, and admired the beautiful house. The feeling of community was strong, and Nathaniel felt like he belonged to something special. Evelyn invited everyone inside, and soon the house was filled with laughter. The kitchen table was covered with delicious dishes from the neighbors. People's voices and laughter made the house feel alive. Nathaniel leaned against the wall, watching Max chat excitedly with a kid from down the road. His face was glowing with happiness. Evelyn walked over to Nathaniel and handed him a glass of lemonade. Her eyes were full of gratitude. I don't know if I've told you this, Mr. Nathaniel, she said softly, but when you first came here, I wasn't sure about you. I thought you were just a rich man trying to feel good about himself. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, a small smile on his face. And now? He asked. Evelyn smiled warmly, her eyes shiny with unshed tears. Now I know you're part of our family. We're so thankful to have you in our lives. Nathaniel swallowed the lump in his throat and nodded. I'm thankful too, Evelyn, more than you know. They stood there quietly for a moment, watching Max laugh with the other kids. His joy filled the house. Nathaniel realized this was what life was really about, not money, not success, but love, family, and making a difference. As the sun began to set, the neighbors started to leave, saying goodbye with warm smiles. The yard grew quiet again, and the peaceful evening settled in. Nathaniel stood on the porch, watching the last car drive away. Max came out and stood beside him, looking at the horizon. Hey, mister, Max said softly, his voice filled with emotion. Thank you for everything. Nathaniel put his hand on Max's shoulder and replied, You're welcome, kid. But remember, this is just the beginning. There's so much more to come. Max looked up at Nathaniel, his eyes shining with determination. I know, and I'm ready. Nathaniel smiled and nodded. Me too. They stood there for a long time, watching the sky grow dark and the stars come out. The warmth of the day lingered in the air. Nathaniel knew he didn't belong in a boardroom or fancy car. He belonged here, with Max, with Evelyn, with people who showed him what truly mattered. This wasn't just about paying back a debt. It was about love, family, and gratitude. Nathaniel knew without a doubt that this was the start of something beautiful. A new chapter for Max, Evelyn, and himself. filled with hope, connection, and the promise that they would always have each other. As the first stars twinkled in the dark sky, Nathaniel smiled at Max. "Let's go inside, kid. We've got a lot of dreams to start working on." Max grinned and nodded. "Yeah, let's go." Together, they walked back into the warmth of the house, ready for whatever came next. Thank you for watching. If you like this story and want to see more, please subscribe to our channel. That way you won't miss any new videos. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and share what you think in the comments. We love hearing your thoughts. Also, don't forget to check out the other videos on our channel. We'll see you in the next story.